Epidemiologist Raywat Deonandan joins us now. Thanks so very much for joining us again. 18 new cases of COVID-19 identified in Manitoba today, 9 here in Winnipeg, 7 in the west and the Prairie Mountain region, 2 in the south. You have been concerned over the last week or two about our climbing cases, that steady climb, again, centered in Hutterite communities. From your perch, what are you seeing in these numbers in the data now?
I'm not seeing them come down meaningfully. I mean, Manitoba has the population the size of Ottawa, and yet you've got twice as many active cases and a test positivity rate that's low at 2.2%, but still too high for my reckoning. So something strange has been happening the last couple of weeks, which isn't really strange, isn't really that mysterious. It has to do with human behavior, and it needs to come down quickly. So while it hasn't been getting worse, which is great, and it has come down a little bit, which is good, it's not coming down fast enough. And I really hope it gets under control within the next 2 weeks.
What is the biggest concern for you? We're seeing a lot of the cases being linked to previous positives, especially close contact. So I get that. Chances are, if one person in the household is got it, then perhaps others will. What about the community-based transmission? They're saying something like 32 cases in the last week so far haven't been linked. Is that a process of contact tracing, and perhaps that number is lower, or do we really think that there's that many unknown cases walking around, and they're getting it and we just don't know how?
Yeah, well, there are always going to be some unknown cases, the asymptomatic carriers, as we call them. And unless we're doing saturation testing, we won't catch those individuals. So in general, I like to take the number of cases and multiply it by a certain factor, depending upon what the burden is in the community at that time. I think right now, tripling it is not unfair, so take the number of active cases and triple it. That's probably the actual number of people walking around. So the community transmission, while not out of control, is always going to be a concern. My concern, of course, is when do these cases, which are still mostly clustered amongst the younger people, when do they bleed over into the older demographic and then result in more deaths? And what does it mean for school openings, which of course is the topic of the day? Because to open schools safely, we got to get those numbers as low as possible and keep them as low as possible as long as we can, because the schools will drive them up again, and we have to watch that so carefully.
Government announcing today that all who ride a school bus, including those younger grades, will have to mask up. That's a good thing in that way, but with a week to go before this all starts, we have to see that rate decline not just in 2 weeks, but in 1 week.
That's right, and it is possible. It might be declining already, and the numbers haven't reflected that yet. So it is possible. We should not panic at all. Just remain vigilant and do the right thing. So that saturation testing I mentioned is important if we can do it. Having everyone wear masks, especially on the school bus, is great. For the in-school controls, reducing class sizes is the single most important thing we can do. And if those class sizes are not small, then the next best thing to do is to wear a mask or put a barrier between you and other people and look into better ventilation. It is possible to mitigate this and to control it, but we have to be vigilant and careful.
So scientists say that there's 3 vaccines, AstraZeneca's, Moderna, and Pfizer's, that are entering the final stage. What is the final stage? Is that stage or phase 3? And how soon could it happen? Dr. Tam saying today we could potentially have one in the spring. Is that realistic?
It is totally realistic because AstraZeneca has already started their phase 3 trials. Recruitment's an issue, and they're trialing it all over the world. You have to trial it in places where the disease is quite endemic, because the way phase 3 trials work is you vaccinate a bunch of people and you let them loose in the world and see which ones get infected and which ones don't. And if you're letting them loose in the world in a place where they're unlikely to be infected, you have to wait a long time. So they're trying it out in Brazil and India and parts of the USA. And I think AstraZeneca will be the first ones with the results back. And if they're not turning people into lizards, as one of my colleagues says, we'll probably get it to market by the beginning of next year, in which case Canada will have a vaccine by the middle of next year.
Raywat Deonandan, thanks so very much for joining us.
Thank you.
University of Ottawa epidemiologist Richard and Julie with